What's the worst date you ever had? I had a date send her drink back several times and eventually had our server bring out all of the ingredients in separate glasses so that she could mix it herself the right way. What's worse is we were both in the service industry at the time. First date after my divorce. She was nothing like her profile picture and just a horrible person, but that's not the fun bit. She stalked me to my work van after the date and took down my phone number. On the way home she asked if I would come back and see her. Said thanks but no thanks and have a nice life. In the preceding days I received numerous texts and phone calls from her and had to have her number blocked by my phone provider. On New Year's Day at 4 AM I received a call from her ex-husband asking what was wrong with her, that she is a good person, etc. etc. Turns out they went out on night and got crap faced together and decided to wall me. I hung up only for them to keep calling me back. Ended up turning my phone off. Woke around 7. Turned my phone on and I had received 20 plus voice recordings that were getting more and more threatening. On the last one I could hear them in a car saying they were coming over to get me. Spoke to my neighbor who gets up early and had gone for a run and he told me there were a couple being arrested around the corner from our place drunk as heck who had hit a light pole. Scary thing is I had my 2 daughters with me that night. In college, I hit it off with a girl and agreed to go on a first date to a school hockey game. When I met her there, I realized I had forgotten my wallet, so I had to borrow $5 from her to pay for my ticket. Not a great start, and I could tell I had dug myself an early hole. Then, once we sat down, we realized that neither of us liked hockey at all. I have no idea why we agreed to meet there, but we were both totally uninterested in the game. So we started talking about other things we were into, and I mentioned that I liked board games. She said, "You sound like my grandma." At that point it was clear that neither of us were into this at all. But it was the first period of a hockey game that she had paid $10 whole for, and neither of us felt right leaving. We sat there and stonily watched the rest of the game. Afterwards, we said, "Let's hang out sometime," and then never messaged each other again. Then, a few semesters later, my friend called me up all excited about a new girl he was dating. He wanted me to come to a get together at his apartment and meet her. I walk in, and of course he's sitting on the couch with his arm around the very same hockey hating girl. I immediately grabbed my wallet, handed her $5, and said, "Thank God. I've been looking for you for 2 years." She laughed, and things went alright after that. That's a good way to handle that. It was with an undertaker's assistant. He'd circle every topic of conversation back to corpses. Me. "So, do you know what you're gonna order?" Him. "Well, I was thinking the steak, but I had eaten steak when we got the River Guyan, and now it makes me feel queasy." I ended up leaving after half an hour. "I'm so sorry. Sounds like a horrible date, but from an outside perspective that's hilarious." He was over an hour late, no text or call, and when he finally showed up, his excuse was, "Sorry I'm late. My mom had to take a crap." This just became my default excuse every time I'm late to anything ever for the rest of my life. Met her at a bar. She ordered food but didn't eat it since it looked disgusting. It looked fine, so we left to go to a different restaurant, and on the walk there, she kept ducking and glancing at the sky like she was being attacked by bats. She hardly said anything over the whole date. It was like pulling teeth to get her to talk about herself. At the second restaurant she took forever ordering and again didn't eat because the food looked disgusting. Emailing about the date afterwards, she admitted that she was high on ice, which I guess is some kind of What do you expect, man? She was in freaking bad country. Mine is not nearly as bad as these, but I like telling the story, so here we go. A guy asked if I wanted to do Korean food and karaoke as our second date. Perfect. I love both. He picked the spots. He was 45 minutes late, but I put our names in and he arrived to the restaurant around when our table was called, so no biggie. He complained that he couldn't eat much on the menu because he's vegetarian, and that they didn't serve alcohol. I mean, that sucks. But you picked the place. He kept lamenting that another place close by has vegetarian options and we should have gone there. When the food came, it became apparent that he did not know how to use chopsticks, but also was too proud to take a fork, so he visibly struggled to eat. The old couple next to us even tried to give him pointers because he was having such a hard time. I was feeling really awkward at this point. Dinner felt like a disaster. I was looking forward to going to a karaoke bar and getting some drinks while laughing at drunk people singing. At least it would offer us some distraction. We started talking about what songs we like to do for karaoke, and I said something like I like to pick a songs that get the crowd excited and singing along, and he goes, "Oh, you like doing karaoke in front of a crowd? I could never do that." And then it dawned on me, he was planning to take me to private room karaoke room, just me and this virtual stranger taking turns serenading each other from a vinyl couch. I was mortified. I would rather sing in front of 10,000 people than just one. I'd like to say I noped out of that date then, but of course not. I followed him around to 3 different karaoke places as he tried to find one that would give up a private room for 2 people on a Saturday night. Hint, they won't, because that's absurd. Finally he gave up and asked if I wanted a drink at a bar. I should have said no, but I had some misguided faith it might get better. He told me about a cool bar he knew nearby. We walked over and it turned out to be the same place we went on our first date. I drank 1 drink and then told him I had to walk my dog and left. A few days later he texted to tell me he was sorry, but also that he wanted to be clear that he wasn't looking for a girlfriend, just someone to take to dinner and sleep with. I was like, okay, no thanks, and that was the end. I mean, cool, but say that up front, and also you're a terrible dinner date. A few days later he texted to tell me he was sorry, but also that he wanted to be clear that he wasn't looking for a girlfriend, just someone to take to dinner and sleep with. Look babe, you're great and all, but I'm only really looking for someone I can finger while singing Sweet Caroline. My first in-person date ever was when I was 23 and I was extremely nervous. Met the girl on Bumble and offered to take her to see Infinity War, which was new at the time. Afterwards took her to get food so we could talk about the movie. I thought we hit it off really well despite my numerous stumbles. Took her home and she asked if I'd like to hang out in her dorm for a bit. I accepted, not really knowing what that meant at the time. We got up there and were chatting when she suddenly starts getting all teary and asks why I'm not attracted to her. I'm confused and tell her I'm very attracted and that I don't understand where this is coming from. She rants about how I never tried to do anything physical all night despite her trying to hunt at wanting it. She tells me she invited me up to get laid and all I did was chat. I managed to calm her down and gave in to her once despite not wanting sex myself. I decided to just go with it cause I was lonely and didn't wanna screw things up anymore with her. I told her going in that I was a virgin and she seemed super cool, until things started going down. She kept laughing and making fun of me, which made it so much harder to perform as a guy, which she found even funnier. It got to the point where I just had to tell her I couldn't do it and I passed out next to her. I woke up the next morning and noticed I was gonna be late for work, so I rushed to get everything together and said goodbye to her when she woke up. She started bawling her eyes out and calling me a pose man for using her for sex, then leaving immediately. So, I called off sick to work and took her to breakfast where she talked about how crappy I am as a person for a solid couple hours. I talked to her for maybe a week after this before I just couldn't take it anymore and told her to lose my number. Really messed up my views on relationships and self-worth for a while. So I don't have many, because I'd only been swiping for a few months before I met someone. But maybe I'm also naive enough to have some funny things happy already. Like the time I thought the bot I was chatting with was just someone who was super distracted. Anyway, matched with a cute girl. She likes to climb. We have good chat. Great. Let's go and do some top rope and hang out. But she doesn't have a car, so I need to pick her up. 30 minutes off route. I'm not thrilled, but whatever. Meet her and, well, it's not her. Or it is her from the profile, but maybe from 5-8 years and a kid ago. I'm tempted to call it off, but I'm too much of a softie. And she says she made cookies. I love cookies. We head off to the small local cliff. We arrive. Walk the 10-minute approach. The conversation is still fine, but I'm wary now. I resolve to just have a nice time and have some fun, and just learn from the experience. She's perfectly nice, but I'm seeing red flags. At the crag she says she borrowed her friend's shoes and isn't sure they'll fit. Same with the harness. Oh, well they do fit. Yay. So I rig the anchor and we start climbing on a nice 5.6 easy for a warm up. Except that she can't climb. Fine. Okay. Whatever. We're still chatting as she works on the off-ground move. and then just bursts into tears. Turns out that it's her sister's dating profile and that's who she borrowed the stuff from, and that her husband doesn't know she's on dating apps. I find all of this out amid tears, and so does everyone else there who can overheat it. Some very awkward talk therapy later. I drop her back at her house. Is it her house? Is it her neighbor's house so that hubby doesn't see? And she leaves me the cookies as an apology. And they were store bought. And they were store bought. The real kicker is in the end. Met a guy at a concert who asked me out to dinner the next weekend. Said we'd go to a restaurant halfway between his place and mine. Gives me the address, which I printed out on MapQuest BC. This was before GPS was normal on phones or in cars. I get there and it's an apartment building. Call him to say I think he gave me the wrong address, and he said, "Nope, you're driving." Takes me to an Applebee's because they have the cheapest happy hour, he said. We have one drink and he eats potato wedges by himself. When I drove him back, he asked me where my overnight bag was. I said I'm not staying the night and thanks for the beverage. He took my keys out of my ignition and told me to go upstairs. I told him if he doesn't give me my keys back, I will start screaming and call the cops. He threw them in the front seat as he got out, telling me I'm missing out on hot tub time. I thankfully never saw him again. I went to a New Year's Eve party with a guy I had been chatting with for months. When we get there, his friends asks him where his girlfriend is, and they were not referring to me. I went out for a smoke at that point and he went after, saying she was boring and he was gonna break up with her. I didn't hang out with him for the rest of the night. I guess I should thank him because I hooked up with the party host instead, and we've been together for 7 years. As a relatively recent mature widower, new and inexperienced to the dating scene after 31 years of marriage, I had a dinner date with a much younger woman who, as it turned out, was extremely aggressive, unheard of in my prime. Ending our first date, I was dropping her off and had intended only to give her a thank you peck on the cheek. However, our goodbye moment morphed into a high school-like makeout session, during which she started, shockingly, to grope me. My two-seater car was dark and cramped and I was wearing a suit and winter overcoat, but I nevertheless was extremely surprised to feel her hand navigating south of my belt. But suddenly she squeezed hard and, with sheer delight and fire in her dimly lit eyes, delightedly exclaimed that I had an enormous penis. In fact, she was squeezing a single large roll of my lower belly fat. For the first and last time in my life, I glanced at my pretend wristwatch and told her that I had to leave due to the late hour and an early morning meeting. I couldn't imagine her reaction and disappointment had our date developed any further, as I am, at best, average. I bailed and we never spoke again. Dude, I laughed so hard at this. A guy approached me at a coffee shop and we ended up hitting it off and talking all night. About a week later we had our first real date at my place so I could cook him dinner. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment at the time and the bathroom door was right next to the kitchen. He excused himself before dinner and proceeded to take the loudest, and what I presume to be, the most massive crap this universe has ever seen. The sounds of the toilet carnage still echo in my nightmares. I of course didn't mention that I heard the whole event and we went about our evening. After dinner we got into my bed so we could watch a movie. 30 minutes into it, I needed to use the restroom, so I got out of the bed to reveal that I had unknowingly started my period and left a noticeable pool of blood where I was sitting. He helped me change the sheets. Anyway, we've been married a year now and he still takes the nastiest dumps known to mankind. The turn S. This story put a smile on my face and warmed my heart. Thank you for sharing. I told my date before we went out that I was divorced. Just as a heads up, she pried for more information and I tell her my wife had an affair. She starts joking about it, then asks to see a picture of my ex and the guy she left me for. Then she called her affair partner cute. Oh, and she spent the other part of the date calling me fat. Went to get drinks with a girl. Talk for about 20 minutes when she says I have a boyfriend, but I'd still like to have sex with you. My boyfriend only lets me have sex with black guys though, so we'd have to film it and you'd have to edit it to make yourself black. I had to tell her I'm not that great of an editor. Also WTF. Hey, at least she's honest. I posted this story about a year ago in a thread asking for stories about becoming instantly uninterested in someone you asked on a date. I'm sure there are worse stories out there, but this was a bit of a shocker to me at the time and stands out as the most awkward first date of my life. I was set up by a friend's girlfriend, shown a picture and said sure. She was good looking and I liked the girl's other friends that I had met. She couldn't be too bad, right? I call her and set up the day and time for pickup at her house. We were both still living with our parents. I arrived to pick her up and there she is with her parents and brother sitting around the kitchen table just talking. I get a bad vibe from everyone but her when she introduces me. On the way to dinner I mention the tension I felt from them all. She says it's because she just broke up with her boyfriend a few weeks before. Her family loved him and they were all upset with her dating someone else. Okay, I can see that. Maybe they'll get over it and like me once they get to know me if we date for a while. Later on I ask about her brother. No brothers. Okay. Cousin? No boy cousins that she is close to. What about the guy with her parents when I picked her up? That was her ex. There to have dinner with her parents. They have had him over several times a week since the breakup trying to get them back together and had made sure he was there when I arrived. Sounded like a terrible situation to get involved in no matter how good looking I thought she was. Dropped her off early. Told her to call me if they ever stopped doing that, and never ended up speaking to her again. You made the right call, but dang. That poor girl. Imagine breaking up with your BF and your parents trying to force you back together with him. And imagine that ex-BF going along with it. Woof. Oh boy, finally my time to shine. I talked to a girl on Tinder 8 years ago. She got drunk and told me to come over because her and friends were playing strip poker. I was on overnight duty so sadly I could not partake. 30 minutes later I receive a picture on my phone that I couldn't even make out. I handed my phone to my roommate and asked if he could figure it out. He says, dude, that's a butthole. It surely was. She had taken a picture of her butthole from a measly 0.5 inches away and it was so close up I could barely tell what it was. I thought to myself, if this is how she leads the rest as to be great, spoiler alert, was wrong. She tells me we should finally meet next weekend at Applebee's. I meet her there and she looks beat, like she had just run 5 triathlons and been awake for a week straight. Not 3 minutes into meeting and sitting down she says she has to use the restroom. She doesn't come back for 30 min plus. The waiter comes up and says he has seen her here multiple times and she has been known to shoot up H in the bathroom and pass out. I'm very not into this at this point, but for her own safety I ask if a waitress could peek in the bathroom and see if she is okay. She was not. She OD'd and died. So that was a thing. TLDR. My Tinder date showed me her butthole then OD'd and died at Applebee's. That's the worst one I've read. She started talking about her life story from childhood to that day, year by year, with every single traumatic story and emotions. That was our first ever date and she didn't even let me speak for that duration. I was like, oh okay, she is now talking about high school, 6 more years left. Hold tight. I was born at a young age. I went on a date with a guy who picked me up and said he just had to swing by his work before we went to the restaurant. No problem. He works in a dental office as an assistant, so he invites me into his work. The office is clearly closed and no one is there, and all the lights are off. Okay, a bit weird, but maybe he just forgot something really important that can't wait until tomorrow morning to pick up. Nope. He's going to the medicine cabinets and taking out a few bottles of ketamine. Okay, I'm now an accessory to theft of dental anesthesia. There was no second date. I've posted my worst on this question before, so I'll post a runner-up now. Dating at an older age is pretty difficult to begin with. This was when I was about 47, and an acquaintance I hadn't known long said she had the perfect guy for me. He had seen me at a sports event with my acquaintance, and I agreed to meet him for coffee after asking a few questions about what he did. Karate instructor and sports coach, and finding out he was about my age. Showed up on the date, and he had very red eyes. He told me right away he was very stoned. This was before we were a legal state. I'm not anti-weed by any means, but showing up stoned was the first red flag. He informed me he hadn't worked in several years, and his coaching days were 10 years in the past. He had been attempting, in his 40s, to become a pro dirt bike rider, living with friends while he was pursuing his dream. and blaming the industry for his lack of success. I started asking gentle questions just to get the full scope of the train wreck that was before me. He asked if I wanted to go dirt bike riding with him, and I politely declined. The bill came for our coffee and pastries, and he sheepishly said he couldn't afford it but would pay me back on our next date and mentioned he was a good friend of the guy my acquaintance was dating. I asked who the guy was, and immediately recognized the name. The guy had been in the news as he just got out of prison for involuntary manslaughter. I offered to treat with no obligation and gently shut down the idea of another date. I was going to ask my acquaintance, what the actual frick were you thinking, but learning who she was dating was a complete answer in itself. We'd still love to hear about your first worst one. We're on Reddit. We have nothing better to do. Literally crap myself on a date once. Wasn't technically a date, but the guy had a farm. He took me to see the animals, feed, act. I walked away for a few minutes and overtrusted a fart. I just looked at him and asked if he could please take me back to my car. He wanted to know why and I said because I pooped in my pants. Guy had a super nice truck and made me sit on my feet all the way back to my vehicle. We actually ended up dating for 2-ish years, and somehow me crapping myself on the first date was the end of all jokes. Had a girl openly flirt with the bartender in front of me. She says she wasn't, but handing him her own phone and asking for his contact info in front of her date seems like it to me. Similar experience here. Was out getting drinks dinner with a girl I had been kinda seeing for a minute, and she invites this attractive tall guy to come sit with us and starts flirting with him. We weren't official or anything, but it was still weird and definitely made me feel pretty insecure. IDK why people do crap like this. Not necessarily a date, but a person I was dating invited me to his parents' house for the afternoon. He wanted to introduce me to them and show me the house he grew up in. I thought it was super sweet and had no problems going. He was also in the middle of moving and needed to pick up a few things, so it really didn't seem that unusual. Yeah, we got there and it was awful. His entire family was there. They traveled from hours away too. This was not just meeting the parents, it was meeting the entire family. Even worse, at some point, this jackass told his parents that he had proposed. We had been dating 2 months. I spent the entire afternoon dumbfounded and just playing along. We were 2 hours from home and I had no cell service, no way to leave at all. We ended up spending the afternoon brainstorming wedding ideas and planning an Alaskan honeymoon that his parents planned to gift us. His brother even called to say congratulations. We drove back to his apartment in silence. When we got there, I got in my car and left. Didn't even bother grabbing my stuff. Weirdest experience ever. I have no idea how he broke it to his parents that we weren't getting married. A bit of a sidebar, but people with big families need to understand it is very stressful to meet everyone at once. Got set up on a blind date once between mutual friends. She shows up to the restaurant already a little tipsy, orders multiple appetizers and only takes like 1 or 2 bites from each one. Then she proceeds to order 3 or 4 more drinks and is visibly drunk at this point. She gets up and says she's going to the bathroom and staggers off. About 15-20 minutes go by, so I try to call her several times but no answer. Finally I decide to pay the check and just leave. About 2 hours later I'm sitting at home and I get a call from an unknown number. It's the police department. She was picked up on a DUI on her way home after she ditched me and gave the cops my number to see if I could go bail her out. Met her for dinner. We seemed to hit it off well in the first few minutes, until I started feeling the worst pain ever in my side. Turns out I had a kidney stone. I unfortunately had to nope out of that one very quickly. She had blocked me via text when I abruptly left dinner, so she never got the message that I ended up in the hospital. I didn't see her for years until we ran into each other at a bar, me with a different girlfriend, her with her husband. I explained what had happened. She felt pretty bad, but hey, no long lasting harm done. I bought her and her husband a drink, chatted for a few, and left them to finish their evening together. Well, it sounds like at least it was an ending you could laugh about years later. I, 35F, met a guy, 41, on Bumble. Had dinner plans to go to a wing joint. I asked if we were still on a few hours prior. He says yep, just gonna shower and jerk off. I joked and said something like, "Whoa there Mr. Perv, TMI, which apparently offended him greatly, as he blew me off for our date. When I asked WTF after the fact, he said he thought I was mad, so he spent the evening anger cleaning, and told me don't ever call me a perv again, but asked if I'd want to meet the next day. Why I said yes is anyone's guess. We meet at Tim Hortons for coffee. He starts by joking that my soon-to-be ex-husband is going to show up to beat him up. He says this repeatedly, even after I explain the ex is out with his girlfriend, and continues to eyeball the windows nervously. Then, after sitting down with our coffee, he asks if I want to go to his car to get some gum. No, thank you. A few minutes later, he asks again, and then again a few minutes later. Dude, if you want some gum, go get it. I'll be right here. He harumphs, does not get the gum, and we continue talking, where the conversation devolves into him ranting about how Hollywood is shoving biracial couples down his throat. I ask if he has any big plans for the evening. He states he's going to go home and jerk off. At least he has a hobby. We walk to the parking lot after the fact, and he asks if he can kiss me. Now, I had just got out of a 14-year, affection-starved relationship, and hadn't kissed anyone but my ex in that time. So, stupid me, said yes. He kisses me, then grabs my arm in a death grip, and drags me to his car as I struggle to get away. Thankfully, his dumbass hadn't cleared the seat off before his abduction attempt, so as he's trying to manage holding on to me while clearing off his seat, I managed to wrench my arm free, run to my car, and get the heck out of there. I'm glad you were able to break free. I'm sure he had a very strong grip. Was on a first date, went to the bathroom, asked the guy to watch my coat, came back and my coat was gone. It had my cell phone, wallet and keys in it. Guy was too busy chatting up the bartender, hadn't even seen the guy take it. We had to Uber back to his house so he could get his truck and drive me home. Had to wake my roommates up to let me in. Had no ID, cash or way of contacting anyone for days. Ended up tracking down the guy who stole it but only got back my phone. He threw out my wallet, keys, with fob on it, and coat. Guy I was on the date with never contacted me again. Most expensive worst first date ever. Was told we were going to dinner and then shopping. I drove to the town, 1 hour each way, cause he didn't have a license. He directed me, didn't know my way around at all. 2. Burger King. Okay, I'll work with it. Standing in line, a worker accidentally leans on a packet of ranch. It breaks open and shoots at me, right on the front of my nicest shirt. Profound apologizing commences. I ended up paying for dinner too. Then we went to Walmart, where his mom worked, so he could get a discount. Didn't buy anything. Drive home he starts apologizing out of nowhere. I thought it was because of the bad date, until the smell hits me. He passed gas and I had to legit pull over and roll the windows down a while. God dang, the man hotboxed you. We went to dinner and he started chatting up the waitress, like interrupting me every time the waitress came over and talking to her for a few minutes instead. After a couple times I just pulled my phone out and started scrolling through Reddit and he complained when he noticed I was on my phone. Cue a lecture about my generation. He was like 6 years older than me, if I recall correctly. Then he got mad when I wouldn't suck his dong in the parking lot. I ended up going back inside the restaurant and calling a friend to pick me up. Dude's car was still sitting there when I left. Frick you, Jason. Whoa, what a dong bag. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.